Job is done, crew is packed up, you're ready to invoice. Then the customer walks out and says, I thought that was included. And now you're standing there trying to remember exactly what was said 3 weeks ago when you were standing in their driveway writing a number on a notepad. This is one of the most common and most avoidable disputes in a trades business. And almost every time it happens, the root cause is the same. Nothing was in writing, or what was written down wasn't specific enough to mean anything when it mattered. Today we're talking about scope of work, what it is, what it needs to contain, and why a verbal agreement will cost you money, time, and customers every single time you rely on one. A verbal agreement feels fine in the moment. You're standing with the customer, you've built rapport, you've explained the job, everyone seems to be on the same page. Putting it all in writing feels like extra work for something that seems obvious. Then 3 weeks pass. The job gets scheduled, materials get ordered, the crew does the work. Something about what the customer remembers doesn't match what you delivered. Now you have a dispute. And in a dispute without written documentation, there is no right answer. There are only two people's memories of a conversation. And memories are selective, especially when money is involved. Cost isn't always about the dollar amount of the disputed item. Sometimes it is, but more often the cost is the hour you spend on the phone trying to resolve it. The callback you send a crew out on that eats half a day of labor, the customer who doesn't leave a review, or worse, leaves a bad one. The energy you spend managing the situation instead of running the next job. Verbal agreements don't just create financial risk. They create operational drag that compounds over time. A scope of work is not a contract in the legal sense. It's not a complicated document that requires a lawyer to write. It's a clear, written description of exactly what work will be performed, what materials will be used, what the finished product will look like, and, just as importantly, what is not included. That last part is where most scopes fall short. Contractors are good at writing down what they will do. They almost never write down what they won't do. And that gap is exactly where disputes live. A proper scope of work answers these questions in writing before a single tool comes out. What is the exact work being performed? What materials are specified? Brand, grade, quantity? What are the start and estimated completion dates? What are the payment terms? What site conditions is the contractor responsible for versus what the customer needs to handle? What is explicitly excluded from this job? Every question a customer could ask mid-job or after the job should have an answer in the scope before the job starts. Most scope disputes don't happen because a contractor failed to deliver what was promised. They happen because the customer believes something was included that the contractor never intended to include. The fix is a simple exclusion section at the bottom of every scope of work. A short list of things that are specifically not part of this job. Debris removal beyond what's generated by this scope. Work on adjacent structures not referenced in this proposal. Permit fees unless otherwise stated. Any work required as a result of pre-existing conditions discovered on site. None of these things are surprising to a contractor. They're all standard, but to a customer who has never hired a contractor before, they are invisible assumptions until the invoice doesn't include something they expected. Writing down what you don't do is not about being difficult. It's about giving the customer a complete picture so they can make an informed decision before the work begins. That's what a professional relationship looks like. Scopes change, customers add things, site conditions require adjustments. Something gets discovered mid-job that wasn't visible in the estimate. Every single one of those changes needs a written change order before the additional work happens. Not after, but before. A change order doesn't have to be complicated. It needs 3 things: a description of what's changing, the additional costs, and a signature or written confirmation from the customer authorizing the change. The most common mistake is doing the extra work first and having the conversation about the cost after. Now you're in a position where the work is already done and the customer has leverage. They can dispute the amount, question whether it was necessary, or simply refuse to pay it. If it wasn't in the original scope and it's going to cost something, it needs a change order before anyone picks up a tool. No exceptions. If you're a customer hiring a contractor, ask for a written scope of work before you sign anything. If a contractor can't or won't provide one, that tells you something about how they operate. A contractor who is organized enough to write down exactly what they're going to do is a contractor who has thought through the job. That level of clarity usually shows up in the quality of the work too. If you're a contractor, a written scope of work protects you more than it protects the customer. It sets the expectation before the job starts. It defines the finish line. It gives you something to point to when a customer asks for something that wasn't included. And it positions you as a professional in an industry where a lot of operators are still running on handshakes and hope. Write it down every time. No exceptions. A verbal agreement is a memory. A scope of work is a document. And when something goes sideways on a job, which it will eventually, a document wins every time. Next video, we're going deep on Google Drive, how to build a complete operational folder system for your business from scratch for free in an afternoon. The job document we talked about in video 6 lives inside this system. So does every contract, every photo, every scope of work you just learned to write. Subscribe and keep building. See you next video.